And hey, this is Raul for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of having a moment to chat with Ross Valory, bassist for Journey, here in sunny Ridgefield, Washington. Welcome to Washington when there's nice weather.
Perfect weather. In fact, it's abnormally warm, but very, very comfortable. Ridgefield services the greater Portland area.
Absolutely. So kind of helping people get to know you a little more. I know you're originally from the Bay Area.
Yes, born and raised in the Bay Area. I still live there.
Gotcha.
With the exception of maybe 2 years in total in Los Angeles or Sonoma and Marin counties up north. I'm pretty much stuck near the coop.
There you go. Well, it's a great place to find good food, so you got to make sure you
Yes, it is.
Yes,
it is. And what I grew up with and what I continue to enjoy is a significant amount of remaining open land.
Oh, nice.
I grew up on the edge of a wilderness. I could walk 5 minutes and I'm out there with whatever. Currently, it's the same. I'm now at the foot of Mount Diablo State Park. So what I like about the area is, of course, the setting and the weather in general. It's gotten a little more crowded, but I put up with it. I just don't go out at commute hour.
There you go.
Only after dark.
In the wilderness. So let's talk about bass, which is what brings us together here. Tell us, how did you get started playing bass?
I started in music by being a part of a musical family. My mother sang, played piano, ukulele. Some of my brothers developed musical talent as well. So I started with piano and voice and ukulele, which eventually became guitar, acoustic guitar, and a classical guitar. And I played clarinet symphonically and bass clarinet throughout the school system. However, I sang in a cappella choirs and all that. So there's sight reading for voice and for clarinet, treble clef. Even the bass clarinet were notes well below the staff, but it was still treble clef.
Yeah.
When I was a sophomore in high school, at the time I had an appetite for quite a variation in influences musically. My mom had anything from Mozart to Miles Davis to doo-wop to Fats Domino to Dave Brubeck. It's quite a big spread of influences. So at the time I was listening to Dave Brubeck, Take 5, and there was an empty spot in our morning PE class one fall, and the next day is this little guy in pointed Italian shoes, peg slacks, silk shirt, coiffed back hair, not too unlike what you're looking at now. And of course, this is 1965 in suburbia. We're in jeans and t-shirts and maybe some Madras stuff. And he shows up a couple of weeks later and walks up and he goes, "Hi, I'm Little Jimmy. I just moved in from Seattle. I'm starting a rock band with a bunch of your friends, and we need a bass player. And I know you play guitar at home and clarinet in the band, but get your mom to go down to Jimmy Webb's Music, get her to rent a bass and an amplifier for you, and I'll show you all the parts, and we'll make change and have fun." Okay, so that's where bass guitar started. So I'm self-taught. There was one point about 5 years later, maybe 69 or 1970, in which I attempted to reapproach the instrument like the other instruments I learned and try to read. But having learned by ear with my mother and having been trained on other instruments in a different clef, and having gone far enough down the road with bass guitar, learning to read Mary Had a Little Lamb. Of course, my eyes are wandering. Okay, next. So I have yet to take time to retrace the valuable aspects of learning to read and write for the instrument.
Well, it's kind of like when I actually started on accordion, and my ear was good enough that I could just pick up the tunes.
And bang it out.
And so they didn't know. I'd act like I was reading, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
So chord charts work well
Yeah.
for both of us, and I've seen one interesting bumper sticker, one of the best I've seen. It says, "Play jazz, drive a cab, play accordion, go to jail." But I'll tell you one thing, Jonathan Cain began on accordion.
Really?
Yeah, and I think he learned to read it to begin with. So
Gotcha.
he grew up in Chicago, so he's a preteen and he's in these accordion, these jazz groups with older men who are doing weddings, bar mitzvahs, Italian parties, whatever, and he's learning all the tunes. But yeah, so you began by playing air like I did with bass and has continued that way. I do write charts. The notation is sort of like Morse code, if at all. You see a rhythmic pattern there. Most of it's, bar lines with chord charts.
Gotcha. Now, with Journey, you're one of the original two people.
Yeah, Neil and I go back to the very beginning of the band, to the summer of 1972.
Wow.
In which he and Greg Raleigh had left Santana. I had left Steve Miller. George Tickner was in the works, and Prairie Prince was at least available to jam with us. And the idea, as we were introduced by a gentleman named Herbie Herbert, who had been working with my former band with Little Jimmy, things have progressed. He suggested that we get together and maybe consider the idea of being the San Francisco rhythm section, or the Golden Gate rhythm section, given at that time in the early 70s, all kinds of artists and players and bands were coming there to hang, to write, to experience it, to record. That idea lasted about a week, and then we decided to become a band. Of course, Prairie Prince could not stay with us, having already been committed to a burgeoning career with the Tubes, and also having become a very successful and original airbrush artist. So we auditioned and played with other people over a year, and finally found an opening with Ainsley Dunbar, who was performing with Frank Zappa at the time. At that point, it's 1975, and we secured a CBS contract and did our first album in 75 with Ainsley Dunbar and released it. But even so, up to that time, we had already done some shows with various players. We had created and recorded a complete demo. And so it was really well formed and well written out, so to speak. So from that point on, we recorded an album every year. There was Journey in 75, Looking at the Future 76, and Next in 77. Those represent one genre of music which was more fusion oriented, extended solos. Yes, it was vocal, but it was more improvisational, more of a jam band, representing sort of the flavor of the San Francisco scene at the time. Then there was a definite change in focus, in direction towards popular music, at which point Steve Perry came to us, and then Steve Smith replaced Ainsley Dunbar. And then Greg Raleigh left by 1980, and Jonathan Cain came. So there were several albums between Next and Escape. And Escape is probably the breaking point that most people know the band by, but there was Evolution, Departure, Captured. And so there was a transition in personnel and a movement towards popular music, which is probably best exemplified by we got a photo bomber here. The best exemplified by Escape and Frontiers.
Gotcha. And
that's the short story.
It's good to know, kind of historically, because Journey's music and the San Francisco Bay scene, late 60s, 70s, was so iconic of what identifies our country, I think, musically.
Yes.
And so I know, interestingly enough, my life path, we ended up leaving the country. We were went to live in Puerto Rico in the 70s, and I'd get this trickle down of American music, and of course
Right.
things like Journey, things like the Doobies.
Right.
And these tunes were iconic. Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yes,
These
yeah,
would
oh,
be
man.
the things that would just a tower of power. These little gems that just created a vision from looking from the outside, from the rest of the world, looking into the United States. This was the American heritage of music, which now you continue to be a custodian of this legacy.
We are,
bringing it
and
forward.
we are so blessed and humbly celebrate the fact that here we are. For Neil and I, it's been 45 years. But
Wow.
for that which represents the most popular generation of the band, here we are 35 years later. We have 4 original members playing in the band, and of course we have Arnel Pineda of the Philippines, who's now in his 10th year. So he holds, I guess, the record of being the longest standing singer in the band.
Gotcha.
And we're bringing this music again to all the people that support and sponsor us by buying tickets and t-shirts and hats, but they come here to experience again the music that they grew up with.
Absolutely.
The music that they have these special moments to remember by.
The soundtrack of our life.
It could be the back seat of the Chevy.
There you
Okay.
go. There you go. But
All right.
it was on 8 tracks.
I wasn't there. Okay. I was in the speakers. I wasn't in the back seat. And the thing is, it's generational as well.
Yes.
They're bringing their children and grandchildren, and so there's one aspect of the demographics of the long-standing fan support for this band that we're so thankful for. Then there's, the sports world, in which they've adopted the most downloaded song in history. I still don't understand. I accept, but Don't Stop Believing being
Yes.
the most applicable song to team spirit and not giving up. There's the sports world engagement. There was the Glee television program
Absolutely. They give a huge
attachment
burst
to
of
it.
that, yes.
There are just numerous school children who sing it in school. It's part of their spirit.
Yeah.
So, and we're seeing, either Generation X or even millennials also attaching themselves to our music. They're going retro to discover not only is this music from a significant time ago, they're still at it and they're still doing it, and these guys show up in the front row.
Yeah.
Dude, and I go, that's obviously not necessarily the son of a Journey fan. That's a new demographic, but
Nice.
that's the musicology of it. I probably am starting to run short of time, so that's the musicology. Do you want to talk about the playing and how it applies to Journey's music?
I tell you what, I know the gear people are going to want to ask, because you do something unique. You play 4-string, but you tune like a 5-string. You tune B-E-A-D, right?
Yeah, it's unique in that it's not common, but it's not an original sort of
Sure.
arrangement. It's actually called Nashville tuning. A lot of the players in Nashville in the 70s and 80s, and maybe they still do, they'll take a long scale 4-string, like a Fender, for instance.
Are you playing a Jackson, or?
I'm playing a Charvel Jackson, which
Gotcha.
I actually had made for just standard tuning in the mid 80s, and I've taken other routes since then. I even have a custom made B bass,
Nice.
just a slightly longer scale, even though it's not required generally, and I reapplied the Charvel Jackson to what I'm doing with Journey as a B bass.
Gotcha.
So it's unique, but it fools a few people. I've had some noted bass players that watch the show or watch the sound check, and they come up afterwards like, dude, man, you got some deep tones out of that. And I'm going, here. And then they go,
B.
But yeah, and it's not like, oh, well, there's a B string there, I'm just going to play it a lot. It has to do with the mindset or the thinking about orchestration and register and what other instruments and notes are playing in the spectrum. and I apply the B string, and being able to go below a low E, which is on almost all the Journey recordings except for Eclipse and Arrival throughout the years. Going below the low E is not because I can, but because it suits the section of that song, or even suits the song in general. So as a result, I'm still having to play parts that were written for and recorded and performed in the past on a standard 4-string, which means all of those lines that normally I could just move up to the G string, I'm moving up to a different register on the instrument to get the full phrase. So that does affect the difference in tonality, but one can adjust by where they play and how they play on the string, anywhere from at the bridge all the way up to the fretboard. So.
Gotcha.
Why not a 5-string would be a common question. Well, I've got small hands. And again, you know, it's like when I play a standard E string, I like that to end there so I can do different things with the action down there and not have this other string in the way. So
kind of unencumbered.
And then there's the math. So it has to do with what I'm comfortable with, what works for a small hand, and the math.
Gotcha. And what's coming in the future? What would you have plans, projects, just cruising along?
For me, I am actually enjoying in the last year or more returning to my own collection of compositions, which really vary from song to song, and I've begun recording them with some fine musicians. It's not like a band thing. It's not like a solo career thing. I'm taking each song and suiting the arrangement and its orchestration and filling it out with the kinds of players that work best for that kind of song. And I'm very happy doing that. It's something I put off for a long time. I mean, I've had a solid, busy career with Journey, but I'm finally balancing that out with what I call simply music as an art. I'm sure something will become of these compositions once they're completed and circulated around, but that's not what I'm looking at. It's simply pure expression. And it's nothing new, but it's something new to me in that I haven't been doing that in a while. I'm happy to say that I am, and it provides a really good balance. So normally in the past, without having that on my plate, I would go home and get back. Well, I can't wait to get home to jump right in the studio with all the energy and momentum and chops and flow from a nice tour like this, and take that energy into the studio and just be simply creative. I must depart now.
Yes. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend it with us here and chatting with us. And
did somebody talk to you about the money? They didn't talk to me about it either. But
I believe it was the tour manager. We'll have to blame them. Anyway, thank you. You saw it here. Bass Musician Magazine. Ross Valory, Ridgefield, Washington.
Raul and Valory.
And Valory.
I shall never forget, Sarah.
There we go.
Okay. All right.